Sustainable Procurement Day. 24 hours of non-stop content, knowledge and tools on how to embed sustainability more easily into procurement. This has been created for procurement by procurement, and we really hope you enjoy it. Today would not be possible without the SPP champions, organisations that have committed to embedding sustainability into procurement functions, and procurement leaders, in fact, that are empowering and equipping them to do so. A huge and special thanks to Accenture, Bayer, BAT, CBRE, Colgate-Palmolive, Eaton, GSK, Klockner Pentaplast, Lego, Merck, Schneider Electric, Solvay, Tetra Pak, Thermo Fisher and Walgreens Boots Alliance. But a big thanks also to the 5 new SPP champions that are joining us in time for World Sustainable Procurement Day. Allianz, AstraZeneca, Avantor, Vodafone and NSG Group. If you're interested in finding out more about becoming an SPP champion and embedding sustainability into your procurement organisation, then get in touch with us. We'd love to have you, and a huge thanks to all of those that have donated and supported us already. Let's drive change together.
Fantastic. What a great opening message there from Oliver. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this World Sustainable Procurement Day 2023 session about Chief Procurement Officer perspectives on implementing sustainable procurement in Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. My name is Luke Abbott. I'm the co-founder of Equipoise, a technology-enabled consultancy with a mission to rebalance the planet and society through sustainable procurement action. I will be moderating this session that brings together CPOs and thought leaders to discuss challenges, opportunities, priorities, and the maturity of sustainable procurement in the AMESA region. I have these fantastic individuals on the panel joining me today. This is the first session focused on these regions and the 7th overall session in this 24-hour content marathon. A big thank you to the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, the small army of ambassadors and Supplier Day for putting on this event. We've assembled this fantastic panel who will be sharing practical insights into what is important in these regions, what key priorities are for CPOs, and how procurement practitioners can take action today in their own organizations. So I'll now begin with the panel introductions. First up, we have Sam Antropong, who is the General Manager for SIPs in the Middle East and North Africa regions. Sam is a senior executive with extensive experience in procurement and supply chain management across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. He has held senior procurement positions and strategic sourcing roles for organizations such as Land Securities in the UK, the Abu Dhabi Municipality in the Middle East, and MTN across Africa. Welcome, Sam. We also have Thomas Uderson, the Chief Procurement Officer of Bayer and the co-founder of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. Sustainability is a matter that's very close to Thomas's heart, inspiring him to go way beyond his Bayer duties, founding the Sustainable Procurement Pledge along with Bernard Coquelin. He strives to activate SPP ambassadors around the globe and drive much needed change towards responsible behavior and sustainable decision makings across supply chains. Welcome, Thomas. We also have on the panel John O'Reilly, who is the Group Head of Procurement Strategy and Sustainability at BAT. John was previously Head of Direct Materials and Logistics and an Operations Director in Switzerland, as long as having many other procurement leadership roles at BAT, which is a behemoth of a company. Prior to BAT, John worked in senior operational roles for automotive, construction, and beverages. This gives John quite a unique perspective and really being able to understand the end-to-end elements of where we can influence different areas in sustainability like climate, human rights, biodiversity, and waste. And last but by no means least, we have Hani Al-Say, Vice President of the Supply Chain at TACOM. Hani is an accomplished award-winning senior executive with over 24 years experience in procurement and supply chain. Hani is passionate about driving the maturity of procurement, supply chain, and sustainability across the region and supporting Saudi 2023 vision with digitalization and building local content in the kingdom. So yeah, very warm welcome to all of our panelists. Before we get started with the questions to them, we'll start with some little pieces of housekeeping. So the SPP wants to make World Sustainable Procurement Day 2023 a great experience for everyone. So please take a moment to review the netiquette. There's a link in the chat which talks a little bit about how this community works together, how we do not try and sell to each other, etc. This session is also being recorded, so just a note on that. The recording will be used to document the event and to be shared on the SPP platforms. If you have any questions for our speaker, please leave them in the Q&A box. You'll find this on the right-hand side of your screens. We'd also love to hear your general thoughts and opinions on topics that we discuss, so feel free to leave these in the chat box, which is just next to the Q&A. Now let's get started. But before we go to questions for our panel, we'd first like to ask our audience a question to kind of feel the temperature, I think, of where they are in terms of sustainable procurement. So we'd like to ask you the question in up to 5 words, which might be hard, but in up to 5 words, what would you like to learn about sustainable procurement in Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia? And if you can please post your answers in the chat, and I'll ask the panel to comment on those. I'll put the question myself in the chat as well, just didn't remember what I said. Perhaps if any of our panelists would like to put themselves in the shoes of our audience, what did you want to know, perhaps a little while ago about this?
Maybe it's too ambitious to solve one of the big challenges we have as mankind in 5 words. Maybe we need to expand the number of words allowed.
That makes sense. That makes sense. A lot of love for the question, but yet no answers. Everything is the first answer from Tran from Vietnam. Can the speakers see the chat section? Okay, I can read this out. AJ Singh says, sustainability without a hole in my pocket, ? So I guess that classic conflict or perceived conflict between cost and sustainability. Rana Lim says focus areas, risks and opportunities are what they would like to learn about. Abhishek Kumar says avoiding inaccuracies in sustainability reporting. Do any of the panel have something to comment on that particular challenge?
Maybe I can share a couple of thoughts, because I do think we often hear this challenge that is very legitimate around data accuracy. And we also hear that organizations in a way are, I think, to some extent paralyzed by the fact that there is inaccuracy. I mean, we see that certainly when it comes to decarbonization. What is a mechanism of calculating scope 3, for example? Reality is that the world hasn't harmonized around one exact way of calculating a methodology. So I think there is a risk of in a way perfection getting in the way of progress. And I would argue in the next couple of years, as we are harmonizing around methodologies, etc., we need to accept a certain degree of inaccuracy, and the world around us need to accept that we are all building our models with the best available information at this particular time. If we don't sort of give each other the leeway to progress, even if there's a bit of inaccuracy, we will be paralyzed, right? So it's a topic that is very legitimate, something we should focus on. But I would argue it's not a reason not to have progress. There's stuff we can do even when the world is a bit opaque.
100%, I agree.
And I like Luke. There's a question there from AJ around sustainability without a hole in my pocket, and I think that's going to become a theme, isn't it? I predict that, but it's such a common question, and I'll really throw it back to procurement professionals to say, look, I think sometimes we give up too easily. Just keep looking for that commercial answer to the sustainable solution, and I think you'll find it. Procurement intrinsically is about obtaining whatever it is you're obtaining, goods and services, for the lowest total cost of ownership, and that has so many component parts. And I've seen so many examples where if you challenge the components of local cost of ownership enough, you will find a commercially viable solution, even for sustainable products. So I don't necessarily agree wholeheartedly that sustainable solution is always in inverted commas, hole in your pocket. And we could give some practical examples if we have time at the end.
I think to comply with Sam mentioned, we need to introduce as a procurement professional today TSCO, total sustainability cost of ownership. I think this terminology today we need to merge all into TCO. It's okay for CAPEX and OPEX, and TSCO, total cost sustainability ownership. We need to factor in today the price of the carbon. If we have product high cost but low carbon emission, and other product low cost but high carbon emission, we need to have this. We need to have some investment today to save in the future.
Maybe I can justify, because I think, Hani, you mentioned a super important word also, because we talk also about investment, right? And I think for a lot of this hole in the pocket, there is a time dimension. If you look at the next quarter, yes, there is a cash flow out. But if you take it over the lifetime of your organization, it is an investment that will make you relevant and capable of meeting the requirements of the future. And I think this cost versus investment mindset might also help. I think it's also important to just keep in the back of your mind that, in a way, if you don't do it yourself, regulations eventually will sort of creep up on you. There will be different mechanisms used across the world, carbon taxes, human rights consequences, fines, and what have you. And you have a choice to make. Do you want to get ready now and in a way navigate a more regulated environment in the future, and be the winner at that point? Or do you want to defer and wait until all these things come falling down on you, and somebody else is going to eat your lunch, right? So there is also a strategic choice to make. Either you do it now and you become really good at it, or you wait and again, somebody will probably take your market shares.
100%, completely agree with that. So we've got some other comments in here, but I'm keen to actually move to the panel questions, and I'll see if I can thread some of these comments into the panel discussion that we have. So we've got a set of questions here, and we would also like to invite the audience to contribute some questions in the Q&A. But I'll start off with Sam and asking what are the most important trends in sustainable procurement in the NENA region that you are currently watching, and how do you see companies preparing for them? We've removed the South Asia region, as Sam's focus is more in Middle East and North Africa.
Yeah, interesting and wide-ranging question. Thanks for that. I think to put into perspective, especially when we're talking about the specific region where I'm based, which is, I guess, the Gulf region, or the Gulf area of the MENA region. Let's just start from the basis point of where we are. So as far as sustainability is concerned, the Gulf region is starting from a very different base than many other regions, for many reasons. One is that clearly it's an area with not an abundance of natural resources. Okay, so we have to generate potable water and resources such as that, which obviously are that those efforts are carbon remitting. And the other thing is that the natural resources that are in this region that actually add to the wealth of this region are, and the ones that are being exploited are non-renewable. So by definition, this is not a very sustainable region in the first place. So that's the base we're coming from, very different to a lot of other regions. However, I think there are huge strides to sustainability in general around the region. The main trend, I think, will be the whole diversification agenda, and that's characterized by the efforts of most of the governments in the Gulf region. And what we mean by that is most of the governments are on huge drives to diversify their economies and their efforts and the societies away from the over-reliance on oil. So what's happening there is they are creating, there's a fast track to creating swathes of new industries, local sourcing methods, which really are driving down the carbon footprint in the first place. So that's a huge drive, and some of those are, the Saudi Vision 2030, which you may have heard about, which is a huge diversification agenda to move away from a reliance on oil and gas, in effect, and creating new industries. And a byproduct of that is creating local economies and near sourcing, local sourcing methods. The other is that clearly in this region as well, there's an awful lot of development going on. Literally cities are being built, not quite overnight, but I think there's something like 36 giga projects going on in Saudi Arabia alone. And the sustainable part of that, which sounds kind of a little bit counterintuitive, is that the main focus of these new builds are that most of them are being built to be carbon neutral upon delivery. So even the biggest of these projects are being built with a focus on sustainability, with a view to when they go live, they will be carbon neutral. So they're not going to be adding to any emissions going forward. Another trend clearly, and I think my other colleague from the Middle East will lay testament to this, Hani from Tahakum, is there's a huge drive towards digitalization. So in the Gulf region, there's a huge adoption of digital methods, which is reducing reliance on transaction costs, paper travel. There's a huge adoption of technology. And all of these things are really led by clear mandates from the public sector, from the governments, to encourage organizations to adopt sustainability as key to what they're doing. And those commitments are being upheld both to, I guess, the requirement and the spirit of the commitments by the public and private sector. So there's a wholehearted acceptance and adoption of new sustainable methods. And so it's no real surprise that you'll see the last COP27 was in this region, was in Egypt. The next COP28 is in this region, in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE. And before that, you saw the World Expo in 2021, 2022 was in Dubai. And the main focus of that expo was sustainability. So there's a huge commitment to the adoption of sustainability, sustainable methods, and those methods going forward. And that's having a real side effect and a knock-on effect on how everyone behaves, whether it's local sourcing and all the other component parts.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. That's really insightful, particularly for those who are not familiar with the region, everything that's going on there. Next question is for Hani, and it's a question about what, as a practitioner, I guess, what challenges do you face in implementing sustainable procurement practices in your region, which I believe is the Middle East?
I think we face in this region same challenges with our colleague facing globally. But today, as Sam mentioned, today we have focusing today in sustainability in the region. And if we talk about Saudi Arabia, we have Vision 2030. Vision 2030, one of the goals today, and this announced last year, to be net zero by 2060. And this is showing how we are in Saudi Arabia and the region now take this seriously. And also we have Saudi Green Initiative and Middle East Green Initiative. This also led by Saudi Arabia. And there is a lot of objective to these two green initiative to reduce the carbon emission. One of them to build 10 billion tree in Saudi Arabia and 50 billion tree in Middle East. This showing how is now in the region the sustainability topic is very important, and also as you know, COP27 in Egypt, COP28 will be in Dubai this November, showing really now this region coming hot, this sustainability coming very hot topic in the region. If we're talking about procurement and the challenges we have it to be sustainable, I think there is three challenges. First one is the general lack of awareness about sustainability important. Why this is very important. Even sometimes not only importance here. What is its sustainability? What is GHG? What's scope 1, scope 2, scope 3? Today, if some discussion with my colleague, they don't know about GHG, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. What's the role of procurement today in scope 3? As you know, the 80% of carbon emission, 80% in scope 3. And the scope 3 is supply chain, downstream and upstream. And this is our responsibility as a procurement professional. We need to have this awareness for the team, for the society, for the supplier about sustainability importance and know-how and knowing what is sustainability. Second point, I think it's a lack of enabler of the change today, like category management process, SRM technique. These two, I think we need to add in this category management concept. We build our strategy as a procurement professional. We need to add sustainability element in our category strategy. Last biggest challenge, really, I see it because we start in Tahakkum, built spend carbon cube to understand what's our today baseline for scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. The biggest challenge we face is the data availability and the quality. This is one of the main challenges today to set the clear baseline and to understand what our carbon cube today. This is the three challenge I see it in the region today.
Thank you, Hani. And I think your comment at the beginning there was reflected in what you said, that the challenges in sustainable procurement for these regions is the same as every other regions. And the challenges that you listed are exactly what I see in the US, in Europe, in Australia. So that's certainly true. And I think it actually resonates as well with a comment from Stefano that says, is it really any different to the rest of the world's challenges in sustainable procurement? So yeah, we're all in the same boat here. Next question is for John. And the question is, how do you prioritize sustainable procurement initiatives in your organization? And what metrics do you use to measure success?
Okay. I think what's important when we look at the prioritization of sustainability within the procurement function is to make sure we've got the right capability and capacity to give the correct level of focus for the procurement function, to make sure we drive the tangible difference. In our organization, senior management recognized how important it was to invest in this area. And we have like what we call a center of excellence, a dedicated department in the center to really define the approach and ensure we define the standards, the capability internally and with our supplier base. I think it's essential to understand the current supplier's level of maturity and capability, so there can be metrics to grow capability through SRM processes, as well as considering key priority areas of materials or spend that will need the necessary level of focus and metrics of contribution that can be incorporated into category strategies or tendering processes, or like what was discussed earlier, when we're talking about the total cost of ownership, but incorporating in the elements of ESG there as well. I think what's really, really important when we look at these points, that when we also think about the social element and the human rights, that them standards that we have we don't only maintain, but we constantly look at and understand how we can further enhance and grow in them areas as well. Yeah.
100%. John, and metrics is such an important question. Is there anybody else on the panel who would like to kind of add to that discussion? So in which case we'll just go to Thomas quickly and ask, what strategies have you found to be effective in engaging your suppliers on sustainability in the region, and how do you ensure that they meet your own sustainability requirements?
I mean, I want to almost build on what Hani said. The strategies in this region are in a way no different from any other region. And if I look at our company, Bayer, I mean, the broader region is super critical for us, both in terms of manufacturing capabilities, in terms of markets, in terms of access to resources, etc. So I think it's central to how business is conducted across the world. I think that's a very important message. And I think here, how do you make it stick? Is first of all to make it a priority. Make sure everybody understands this is real. The expectations are here to stay and most likely to increase over time. If you do it well, it will bring preferential treatment. There's good things coming out of all the efforts that you put into it. Make sure it's sort of integrated into your processes. It's part of your contracting. It's part of your supplier code of conduct, etc. So this what is very important to capture. And then I think when it comes to, so how are you actually going to do it? I think it's super critical that you are not sort of sitting on your high horse telling everybody, what they're supposed to do. You need to roll up the sleeves. You need to engage. Make sure that the experiences that you have is made available also to the suppliers. That if you have more resources, or if you've already done it, or you've seen it in another part of the world, you need to act as a knowledge broker and make this available so that you really capacity build together. So how do you do it? Don't tell people, roll up the sleeves, get engaged. And then I think the other dimension is, again, we can't do this on our own. And I think it's an African saying, right? If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And I think here, the challenge we have is enormous, and we need to go together. So it's very important that you look around and identify sort of which industry initiatives, which competitors, are you actually able to collaborate with? How do you make sure you don't all confuse your suppliers, but that you collaborate, harmonize the standards, etc. And we've seen earlier today also a couple of examples. There's Together for Sustainability for the chemical industry, PSCI pharmaceutical. AIM Progress was talking earlier today also around a lot of activities in the human rights space, right? So figure out, who are you going to do it with, and don't try to solve it all on your own. That would be it. So how do you engage, and together with who?
Fantastic. And I'm conscious that I think people will be joining this call because they're potentially operating in these regions, and they're working as procurement practitioners, consultants, etc. But there might also be people joining who are buying from these regions. So when it comes to the topic of supplier engagement, is there anything specific that the panel would like to highlight the buyers from Europe, US, wherever, should be conscious of when trying to engage suppliers on sustainability that come from these regions?
So it's a very interesting question, Luke. It's a weird one because this region tends to be a hub, which tends to be net importing, and actually it's usually a case of buyers in this region trying to navigate some of the logistics and actually shift their operations to having local sourcing rather than the other way around. So I don't think there's anything specific or that's unique to this region, except that what you do find in this region is that it's very much a re-exporting region. It's abundant with free zones, so a lot of manufacturers are exporting goods in here for a period of time, rather to be re-exported, rather than them necessarily being being consumed within, whether it's Dubai or the ports in Saudi Arabia, etc. So I won't say there's anything specific that buyers need to be cognizant of from from suppliers here particularly. It's more the other way around. It's more people in this region looking for more and more diverse marketplaces other than the usual ones. I think India is a huge market, China is a huge market. Obviously, for this region, it's more the buyers here looking for better sources of goods and services and better ways to make things or produce things or manufacture things closer to home rather than always importing.
And I would agree with Sam, of course, when it comes to
Any other
the Middle East, certainly. Oh, I don't know, can you hear me, Luke? So I just want to say again, the reason if we expand it a bit further and include also lots of Africa, and if you look at the agricultural sector, it's very clear that it is a fact that there is widespread poverty. And we do certainly know in a lot of the farming communities, there are lots of challenges also around human rights, child labor, etc. And I think it's important that you recognize that these things are real threats. They are real violations, possibly within your own supply chain. So having, again, the commitment to engage with your suppliers, with the local communities, maybe building up partnerships with local regulators to address the underlying challenges, which again could be poverty and knowledge, etc. So I think when you do, particularly the agricultural side, and I'm sure, John, you have experiences around this as well, the smallholder farmers, they need a special support, helping hand. And if you want to engage with these communities and benefit from their hard labor, it is important that you also engage and commit to those communities and help them sort of in their own evolution as well.
I think that's a good point, Thomas, and for the audience, it's a good point to point out that it's a huge region that has huge characterizations in different areas. And you're right, if you're talking about the Gulf is different to the North Africa, is different to the rest of Africa, is different to the Asian section. So you're absolutely right, Thomas. There are huge characterizations and no generalizations in this region.
Fantastic. And then just to build with that with a story of my own, I think sometimes there is a perception in European and perhaps North American countries that because environmental regulations, for example, are not as advanced in some of these regions, that actually the companies operating in them might not have such a strong sustainability profile. But I was working with a company in Switzerland, and what they actually found is that the companies that they were buying from in India had much higher sustainability credentials than the local companies they were working with in their area. And the reason for that was that, okay, the companies that they are buying from in India, in a specific example, were the types of companies that were sophisticated enough to sell and compete on a global stage. Whereas some of the companies they were potentially buying from in Switzerland were sort of family-run businesses down the road. So that was quite an interesting change from the perception to actually the reality. So that's a nice example of that. Great. We'll continue on with the questions. We have one for John again. What KPI targets and talent strategies? What KPIs, targets, talent training strategies, and sustainability targets are you using to make sure that sustainable procurement becomes the default behavior for procurement professionals?
Okay, that's a lot of elements to cover. So thank you, Luke. I think the key point we need to look at is, okay, what are we already doing as a procurement function? And when you look at the standards you already have, where's there an opportunity to further enhance and integrate ESG into it? So when we talk about, pre-supplier qualification and the questionnaires that we ask there, okay, let's start asking about water. Let's ask about forest. Let's ask about climate. Social standards I mentioned earlier, as far as, okay, how do we further enhance continually? Thomas mentioned about supplier code of conduct, which I think is a continual focus area to make sure that, okay, what's that minimum level of working with suppliers to make sure they're the standards that need to be abided by going forward. So I think that's a critical part as far as how do you embed into BAU. So from a pre-supplier qualification to going into the whole RFX piece, your contracts, so that when you're in a contract perspective as well, okay, what KPIs do you put in there to make sure that there's that year-on-year focus, and it then embeds basically into your SRM, so that there's dashboards there. Okay, right. So from a renewable energy perspective, how's your evolution? Where are you moving to? Yeah. Okay, when we talk about things like CDP rating, how is the evolution from that perspective? What are you doing? When we look at things like due diligence, where we have social audits as well, really understanding how our suppliers are performing in them areas, making sure we embed that into a supplier, like a balanced scorecard, really. So we have the full focus of that relationship and making sure that we collaborate, we drive on the journey together to make sure that we can really make a difference, in all different areas. I think from a talent perspective, there is a hell of a lot of seminars out there and reading available. There's, so I think first and foremost, that the nice thing that I've found definitely within the procurement function and in general, when you speak about this subject, there's a lot of passion around. So there's a lot of appetite and hunger to learn more and more, because, there's the old saying of value beyond savings. Well, now we've got ESG, we can work with a massive community of suppliers, and we can really make a difference in a hell of a lot of very powerful areas. When we talk about the planet and we talk about human rights, that's a fantastic opportunity to go value beyond savings.
100%. And then just linking that back to something that Hani said earlier, where it's about the initial education piece, like what is sustainability, what is scope 3. Do the panel have any ideas on how you try and disseminate that information through your procurement function and also through your organization in general? Because I'm sure we've got a lot of people on this call who are either responsible for sustainable procurement already, or they are those passionate champions. But I'm sure in their team there will be the other 90% who are in that same boat of what is scope 3. So how do we as leaders kind of push that message out in the best way?
I think if I may look, in our organisation, from a strategy perspective, sustainability is very much front and centre. So even this year, when we released our annual report, ESG was embedded in it. It was one report. It wasn't two separate reports. So it's very much seen as an organisation, as part of our culture, that sustainability and ESG is front and centre. Therefore, when we talk about mandatory learnings, I know mandatory sounds a bit harsh, but nonetheless, when we talk about learnings that need to be understood across the organisation, sustainability and the foundation of what you need to know is also a training platform that's been rolled out across our entire organisation.
I mean, maybe, Luke, I can just add, because the question you ask is at the center of SPP, right? That's why we actually came together. That you'll be maybe not surprised to know, but 90% of the people who listen to this, have exactly that problem. That the topic of sustainability is so enormous, so complex, so dynamic, right? It changes almost weekly or daily. And most people really don't have easy access to where do I get the answer to the problem that I have right now. And that's why actually SPP was put together, because amongst our procurement community, we have the answers. There's not a lot which hasn't been sort of identified already. Our challenge as a community is that there's an asymmetry between the ones who know and the ones who now want to figure it out. And that's why, I would certainly encourage everybody to join SPP and join our LinkedIn group, but also help, share your knowledge. It's not about just receiving. There is, people who have those solutions. So that's what we can do together, right? And as time progresses, it's going to be a little bit more fancy with a technology platform, etc. But we have the answers amongst our procurement organization. We just need to fix this asymmetry that is taking place right now.
I think just to support Thomas as well, I think you mentioned it earlier about going far with others. I think there's also an element of this is a learning journey. Yeah. So, even through discussions and engagement with suppliers, there's always an opportunity through the community when you're engaging with suppliers and opening up discussions, that you'll find further new best practices continually, so that's the nice part about this area. There's a fantastic opportunity of discovery as well, and then how do you replicate going forward as well,
I mean, I'll support what
100%.
Thomas and John are saying. It's essentially, you can't put sustainability in a box or to one side or whatever else, or there's really no point in having a sustainability policy or sustainable procurement policy. It should just be a procurement policy with sustainability being intrinsic throughout it, because once you put it to one side, it loses its importance. And also, it should be high up enough in an organization. I think procurement or supply chain are very, very important to the implementation of sustainable practices, but it should really come from the top, essentially. And only when that happens do you really get some real outcomes. And when I say coming from the top, that's within organizations, but also within governments, because that's when the real change happens. So to me, sustainable procurement really shouldn't be a word. It should just be procurement, but the practices within it should be sustainable.
100%.
If I look, because I think Sam is onto something really, really important here. I think there's even a parallel we can draw between sort of the quality movement in the 80s and the 90s, right? We came from a period where the questionable quality was, part of how business was conducted. And back then, the same argument was, but, who's going to pay for the quality? And fast forward 20, 30 years, thankfully, it's a no-brainer. Of course, you want to have quality and it needs to meet the specification. Sustainability hopefully will follow a similar sort of evolution, that in 10, 20 years, we don't talk about sustainable procurement. It's just, how business is conducted.
100%. And linking to the comment there about collaboration with organizations like the SPP, it's a question for the panel. How do you see organizations collaborating with other stakeholders like government, you mentioned Sam, industry associations and NGOs, specifically in this region, to promote sustainable procurement practices?
I think this is one of the most important things today, and to collaborate between government and NGO, because today we need to start this collaboration today as a part of the awareness, as I mentioned in the beginning. It's not awareness, importance of this sustainability today, because today it's it's initial initiative or we need to start, but in the future it will be regulated. This may be one of the challenges. There is no regulation for this, but if regulation is coming, everyone will need to comply. Like when we start the local content, in the region, if we're talking about local content in country value, 2017, 18, it's initiative. But today in Saudi Arabia, local content is mandatory. We need to, as a percentage of our purchase, should be local content. This is today is regulated. Sustainability is same. We need to work with the government, with NGO, with other, to collaborate together and put regulation together, not waiting until regulation would come. Because I think in some countries in Europe, they start with taxation and the sustainability. Also, I think start IFRS, they start put this as a part of financial statement. It will hit the bottom line now. If you don't comply with the sustainability, will hit your compliance. Even your company is profitable, but if you're not meeting the sustainability requirement, will hit your bottom line. Maybe this from my side, if the team.
100%. Very interesting. And we'll just spend some time to move to the questions in the chat now. So we have a question from AJ Singh asking Hani if we could have a quick overview of TSCO, this total sustainability cost of ownership concept that you mentioned.
Yes, maybe if you back to my, I wrote one article about this in my page in LinkedIn, but I can give a brief here. As I mentioned, we focus usually on TCO, but today we need to start calculate any product we need to buy as a procurement professional. What's the carbon emission for this product? We need to start put the baseline and agree with our supplier for the reduction this carbon emission each year. And the good thing is this target for net zero, it's an organization and their supplier. It's mutual target. The TCO today, if we have one product, costs, let's say, 10 euro, but the carbon emission is high. And we have other products cost 12 euro, but the carbon emission is low. This is the decision now. We will invest more, but we will reduce the carbon. This is the idea. The investment today to mitigate in the future, and as Thomas mentioned, this investment will see it in the future. This is the concept, and there is more details about that in my article.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hani. And we're close to the end now, so I'd just like to wrap up with a final question for all panelists, which is, what would you like the audience's key takeaway to be from today's discussion? Anyone can start.
I mean, for me, I'm quite happy to say, look, it's all about always exploring all the avenues to making that business case for a sustainable outcome. So there is always a sustainable outcome, whether you use the TCSO model or others, which can demonstrate, in most cases, that going the sustainable route is not necessarily commercially unviable. And I can recall conversations, or one particular conversation I had with an organization once, and this organization has several retail outlets across the whole Middle East, like hundreds of malls they operate. And their question was around, we're looking at one particular thing, which was the paper towels they use in restrooms. And they wanted, between the procurement team and the facilities management team, they wanted to validate why they should use the recyclable paper towels, which were 5 times the cost. And just based on that, we were able to, amongst all the other stakeholders, validate the cost just on a commercial basis, based on a number of inputs. One, the usage of the non-sustainable or the non-biodegradable one option was a lot more. So even though the cost was 5 times more for the recyclable ones, just by the flimsy nature of the other option, people were using more of it. Okay, so the usage was more, so you're already going to spend more money. And secondly, which was quite interesting, we found out that because the other option, the other paper towels, were not biodegradable, they would every 6 to 7 months clog up the waste pipes of most of the facilities, and they'll require facilities management intervention to unclog those pipes. So if you add in the cost, you've already made a commercially viable reason to go for the sustainable product. So my key take is, and whenever we engage, we're always looking to give the tools to everyone involved in procurement to be as commercially minded as possible, and to be able to articulate in a non-technical way a procurement business case, because there is always a commercial outcome for your sustainable recommendation.
Brilliant.
I think maybe I can add, and it's back to the comment around the accuracy of data. I think this sort of the saying that every long journey starts with one small step, and I think that's important for also to recognize that we won't be getting there in one whoop. We need to move, and most important is actually that we take those first steps. So and Spider-Man's uncle also reminded us that with great power comes great responsibility, right? So, and you have those two. So we have an enormous responsibility, and it's a long journey. So just get going, find some friends, join SPP. Chances are somebody has the answer. Just look for it. Don't be shy.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I think, if I may, I think just to support really what Sam and Thomas have said there as well, I think the key point is to start having the conversations now. You don't need to be an expert but start having the conversations now so you can discover the opportunities that are available for you. You know, if you're a category manager, start looking at your strategy and think, right, okay, how do I factor in ESG here as far as what I need to do? You know, if you're having supplier management meetings, put ESG on the agenda, have the discussion. Try and make sure you've got that platform and that window for discovery to really drive the opportunity as well going forward. So that would probably be one other takeaway I'd like the audience to think about.
Brilliant. And Hani, any takeaways from you?
I think it's great. The most important thing is really the awareness, as I mentioned. We need to have this awareness for team, for supplier, for all people in the organization. And also, this is to join the SSP. This is very important as a takeaway. So be champion in sustainability. That's one of the main takeaways today.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great. Now, just to final wrap up with 1 minute overtime. I hope Supply Day don't kill me. But yeah, thank you very much to our speakers and the audience. It's really great of you to join us. If you'd like to continue the conversation, our speakers can join the lounge. I will be in there to answer any questions that you have. Please stay tuned for the next session on sustainable packaging and how to engage suppliers to embed sustainability. That's going to be hosted by Oliver Hurry, who hopefully my moderating skills have somewhat lived up to in this session. Please do not forget to sign the pledge and join the SPP community. It couldn't be much easier. It's just there on your screen. Please, everyone, if you can provide some feedback in the chat related to the session, this will help us improve the next World Sustainable Procurement Day. But yeah, lastly from me, thank you so much for joining. And I hope you found the session valuable.
Thank you.